this video, we're asked to use the square root property to solve these two equations. And we want to be very careful that we pay attention to the directions of how to enter our answers, including the fact that if we have no real solutions, we are to type DNE, which stands for does not exist. When we do the first problem, we start by adding 144 to both sides. So we have 2b squared equals 144. Dividing both sides by 2 to get the squared variable alone, we get b squared equals 72. Then we'll take the square root of both sides so that we have b instead of b squared. And since we took the square root of the left side like this, we're also going to do it on the right. But we also have to be careful to remember to put plus minus on the side opposite the variable. So we're going to now have plus minus the square root of 72. Well, that's pretty good, but it's not simplified. So take the 72 and think of all the numbers that are perfect squares that might fit into it evenly. So perfect squares, what are they? 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and so on, right? So what you want to do is try to find the largest perfect square that'll go evenly into that number. And I discovered that 36 goes into 72 evenly because you can rewrite 72 as 36 times 2, right? And 36 being a perfect square can come out from under the radical sign. So what we're going to have is b equals plus or minus the square root of 36 is 6, and the 2 is still trapped under the radical. So that is what you'll want to enter here. You'll want to enter 6 square roots of 2 and negative 6 square roots of 2 as your answers. For the second part, again, we're going to start by moving the constant term to the other side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 150 on both sides to get 2 times j squared equals negative 150. Then dividing by 2 on both sides to get j squared alone, I get j squared equals negative 75. Now taking the square root of both sides, and not forgetting my plus minus, I realize right away that my answer here is going to be does not exist because I have a negative underneath a even root symbol. And you may have learned this before and forgotten that I is equal to the square root of negative 1, which makes it anything that has a square root with a negative under it will have I for, in other words, imaginary, not real, in the answer. Okay, so that's going to be DNE. Any time that it's not real, or you get a negative under an even root, then it's not a real answer. Sometimes you can enter the answers with the imaginary unit, but for here, they told us to use DNE if it was no real solution. So since we don't have any real solutions, we only have imaginary solutions, we write DNE here. But let's just talk about what this would look like if we were able to enter answers that were imaginary, or complex is another word for that. We would do this. We would keep the plus minus. We would rewrite the negative 75 as negative 1 times 25, because that's the largest perfect square that goes into 75 evenly. And then we would be able to take out from this, we would do plus or minus the square root. Well, we want to pull out what we can. So the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of negative 1 is I, and the 3 is just stuck underneath there. So you could enter it like this. Sometimes you put the I at the very end, like that. Okay, so those are possible ways that you could enter an answer that allows for imaginary answers. But since this one didn't, we just put DNE for does not exist.